The workshop smelled of fresh sawdust and lemon oil, a combination I'd come to associate with him over the years. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, catching dust motes that danced in the air like tiny constellations. I stood there, trying to appear casual as he moved around the space with practiced ease. This was his domain. After all, a converted barn with high ceilings and exposed beams that he'd restored himself. Tools hung in perfect order on the wall, each one with its designated spot. The carpenter, James, had always been methodical that way. Everything in its place. Everything measured twice, sometimes 3 times, before the saw ever touched wood. I'd known James for nearly 5 years now. What began as a simple commission, built-in bookshelves for my small apartment, had evolved into something neither of us had anticipated. First came other projects, a coffee table, a desk for my home office, a garden bench. Then came friendship, conversations that stretched late into evenings, shared meals, and eventually, this undefined space between friendship and something more that we'd been circling for months. Today's project was different, though. He was building something for the house I'd just purchased, my first real home. Window seats with storage beneath, custom-made for the bay window that had sold me on the place. It felt significant somehow, him creating something permanent for my new beginning. I watched as he selected a measuring tape from his tool belt, the metal case worn smooth from years of use. His hands were fascinating, strong and calloused, yet capable of such delicate work. I'd spend hours watching those hands transform raw lumber into functional art. Carpentry isn't just about building things, he'd told me once. It's about understanding the material, respecting its grain and character. Wood is alive in a way, even after it's cut. It responds to temperature, to humidity, to how you treat it. The same could be said for people, I thought, though I kept that observation to myself. I need to check these measurements again, James said, breaking the comfortable silence between us. The old farmhouse walls aren't square, and I want these seats to fit perfectly. He moved closer, measuring tape extended, his body suddenly near mine in the narrow space by the window. Hold still, he murmured, reaching around me to measure the depth of the windowsill. I could feel the warmth radiating from him, smell the faint scent of coffee on his breath and the cedar notes of his soap. My heart quickened as he leaned in, his arm brushing mine. The carpenter measured once more. Don't move, he said, breath warm near my cheek. I froze, not from obedience, but from the sudden intimacy of the moment. We'd been close before, but this felt different, charged with something neither of us had acknowledged out loud. His eyes met mine briefly, then returned to the task at hand, professional as always, though I noticed a slight tremor in his usually steady hands. Was he affected by our proximity too? Or was I projecting my own feelings onto him? In that suspended moment, my mind raced with contradictory thoughts. Part of me wanted to step away, to return to the safety of our undefined friendship. Another part wanted to turn toward him, to close the small distance between us and discover what might happen. The measurement he was taking seemed suddenly symbolic, calculating the precise dimensions of possibility between us. I remained motionless, barely breathing, aware of every point where his body nearly touched mine. Outside, a blue jay called sharply, breaking the spell. In the distance, the rhythmic sound of a neighbor's lawnmower provided a mundane counterpoint to the tension in the room. The workshop itself seemed to hold its breath, the tools silent, the wood waiting. Dust particles continued their lazy dance in the sunbeam that cut between us, marking the passage of seconds that felt like hours. I thought back to our first meeting, when I'd nervously explained my bookshelf ideas to this stranger with serious eyes and a reputation for exceptional craftsmanship. He'd listened intently, asked thoughtful questions, and sketched a design that somehow captured exactly what I wanted before I could fully articulate it myself. "You have good instincts," he'd told me, surprising me with the compliment. "You know what you want, even if you're not sure how to get there." That observation had felt strangely personal, as if he'd seen something in me that others hadn't bothered to notice. Over the years, I'd spent countless hours in this workshop, initially coming to check on projects, then staying to watch him work, and eventually just to be in his company. I'd learned the difference between cherry and walnut, how to sand with the grain, why certain joints were stronger than others. "Here, like this," he'd say, standing behind me, guiding my hands as I attempted simple tasks. His patience seemed endless, his knowledge boundless. Under his tutelage, I created small projects of my own, clumsy at first, then increasingly competent. Each success had built my confidence, not just in woodworking, but in other areas of my life as well. "You're different when you're here," my friend Elise had commented once after running into us at a local cafe. "More relaxed, more yourself somehow." I dismissed her observation with a laugh, but later found myself turning it over in my mind like a piece of wood being examined for its potential. Had James shaped me somehow, the way he shaped his materials? Had I allowed myself to be transformed in his presence? The memory of our most challenging project came to mind, a dining table I'd commissioned after my promotion last year. We'd argued over the design, my desire for something contemporary clashing with his insistence that the wood I'd chosen demanded a more traditional approach. For a week, tension had simmered between us, communications reduced to terse texts and brief phone calls. Then one evening, I'd arrived at the workshop to find him working on a hybrid design that somehow honored both our visions. "Compromise doesn't mean either of us loses," he'd said, showing me the sketches. "It means we create something neither of us would have thought of alone." We'd celebrated the completed table with a bottle of wine, sitting at it in the workshop long after the sun had set, talking about everything and nothing until stars appeared in the sky outside. Now, as he took that careful measurement, I wondered if we were at another crossroads. The window seat he was building represented permanence, a commitment to place, to home, to staying. For years, I'd moved from apartment to apartment, city to city, relationship to relationship, never quite settling. The house purchase had surprised everyone, including myself. "What made you decide to put down roots?" James had asked when I told him about it. I hadn't been able to answer then, but standing here in his workshop, I wondered if he was part of the reason. This man who understood the value of patience, of crafting something meant to last. The measuring tape retracted with a metallic zip, breaking my reverie. James stepped back slightly, but not completely away. His eyes, the color of aged bourbon, studied my face with an intensity that made my breath catch. What was he measuring now? The distance between us? The potential risk? The possible reward? "The dimensions are trickier than I thought," he said, his voice lower than usual. "These old houses, they have character, but no straight lines." Was he still talking about the window, or was he speaking in metaphor? With James, it was often hard to tell where craftsmanship ended and philosophy began. "Is that a problem?" I asked, my own voice sounding strange to my ears. "Not a problem," he replied, making a note in the small leather-bound notebook he always carried. "Just means I need to be more precise. Custom work requires attention to the unique qualities of the space." His eyes met mine again, holding this time. "It's worth the extra effort to get it right." Something shifted in that moment. The air between us seemed to change density, become charged with possibility. I realized I was at a decision point. I could maintain the careful distance we'd preserved for years, or I could acknowledge what had been building between us, slowly and steadily, as one of his handcrafted pieces. "James," I began, then faltered, unsure how to continue. How does one measure courage? How does one calculate the risk of vulnerability against the potential for joy? In carpentry, measurements are precise, fractions of inches matter. In relationships, the measurements are invisible but no less crucial. He waited, patient as always, giving me the space to find my words. This was his gift, the ability to recognize when to act and when to be still, when to cut and when to let the wood settle. I took a deep breath, drawing courage from his steadiness. "I've been thinking," I continued, "about why I bought this house. Why I'm suddenly interested in putting down roots after years of temporary arrangements." The words came easier now, flowing like water finding its path. "I think part of it is knowing you're here." That sounds strange, maybe, but it's true. You've built so many pieces of my life already. Tangible, beautiful things that make spaces feel like home. And somewhere along the way, you became part of what home means to me. The confession hung in the air between us, as real and solid as the pieces of oak leaning against the workshop wall, waiting to be transformed. James set down his notebook and pencil carefully, deliberately, his movements measured as always. The silence stretched, and I wondered if I'd miscalculated terribly. Then he smiled, not his usual slight upturn of lips, but a full smile that transformed his serious face. I was beginning to think I'd have to build you an entire house before you noticed. Relief and joy bubbled up inside me like sap rising in spring. You knew? I suspected. Hoped. He moved closer again, this time with clear intention. I don't build window seats for just anyone, you know. They're intimate pieces, meant for pausing, for looking outward while being firmly grounded within. They're not casual furniture. I laughed then, the tension of the moment breaking into something lighter, yet somehow more profound. Is there a furniture metaphor for everything in life? Absolutely, he answered, his hand finding mine with certainty. Life is just a series of careful measurements and bold cuts, sanding rough edges and finding the right finish. His fingers interlaced with mine, calloused palm against my smoother one. And sometimes, recognizing when two pieces are meant to fit together. The carpenter's measuring tape lay forgotten on the workbench as he leaned in, his intent unmistakable now. Outside, the world continued. Birds called, neighbors mowed lawns, clouds passed over the sun and away again. Inside the workshop, something new was being crafted with the same care James brought to all his creations. As his lips met mine, I understood what he'd been teaching me all along, that the most beautiful things take time, that rushing compromises quality, that patience is rewarded with results that last. The kiss was both a beginning and a culmination, the perfect joining of two pieces that had been carefully prepared for this moment. When we finally separated, the light in the workshop had changed, the afternoon sun casting longer shadows across the floor. James touched my face with the same reverence he showed to his finest woods. "So," he said, his voice both familiar and new, "about those window seats." I smiled, feeling the future unfold before us like a blueprint. "Tell me what you're thinking." He reached for his sketchbook, and as we bent our heads together over the drawing, I marveled at how the simple act of measuring had led us here. In his careful calculations, he had measured not just dimensions of wood and space, but the contours of possibility between two people. The window seats would be built, installed, and enjoyed for years to come. But the true craftsmanship that day wasn't in the woodworking. It was in the courage to measure the distance between friendship and love, and to finally, deliberately, close that gap. As we left the workshop that evening, hand in hand, I glanced back at the space that had witnessed our transformation. The tools hung in their places, the wood waited patiently for tomorrow's work, and the measuring tape lay on the bench, a simple instrument that had measured so much more than inches. In carpentry, as in life, the most important measurements are often the ones that can't be seen, only felt. And sometimes, the most precise measurements lead not to furniture, but to home. Total _char_count, 13,482.